Hi guys, it's Marie and welcome to a quick run through of Chopin's Nocturne Opus 72 No. 1. I want to take a moment just to look at some of the chord progressions that are going on in this piece because it's really cool. He deals with a lot of deceptive cadences and he also does a ton of secondary dominants, and it's really cool. Brief history lesson, what is a secondary dominant? A secondary dominant is where, let's say for example, we are in E minor. The dominant of E minor is B major. The dominant of B major is F sharp major. So whenever you see an F sharp major in this piece, you are dealing with a secondary dominant. Dealing with secondary dominants in music is really neat because it creates a lot of tension and it makes resolutions really powerful and more drawn out than just a simple this chord. It's a really neat way to bring resolution to your piece. So we first see a deceptive cadence in measure 5 to 6. Before that, just so you know, you've got a ton of E minor stuff. In the left hand, it's all this E minor. All of measures 1 and 2 is E minor. Measure 3, you're in B major. You have a B7. Back to E minor. Back to B7 in the top of measure 4. Back to B in top of measure 5. Measure 6, you want to hear an E minor, but he goes to G major. And now he's going to visit F sharp, which is the dominant of B. There's our B. F sharp again. And then measure 9, we're going to go back to B, which is the dominant of our tonic. Finally, in measure 10, we're home again. Back to the dominant, then back to the tonic, and actually it's a direct repeat of the chord progression until measure 14. Here's where it gets weird. Measure 14, we have landed into what is functioning as a G7, which is the dominant of C. G7 again, just to reaffirm to the audience, yes, that's what we meant. Then we're visiting in A7, and A7 is the dominant of D minor, which is what we have next. Then in measure 17, we go back to B, which is the dominant of E. Then we have another B, B7. Now we have B major, E minor, which is that dominant. Now we've got F sharp major 7, which is our dominant of B again. Dominant of B again, F sharp major. B in measure 22. So just to walk through that again, measure 14, you have G7 to C, which is there's that dominant tonic, and then you have A7 to D minor, which is a dominant tonic, and then you've got B major to E minor in 17, which is dominant tonic, and then you've got B minor, B major now, and this is the dominant of E minor, which is next. Measure 20, we have F sharp, which is the dominant of B. F sharp again. B. So that whole section is a 7th chord and then it's tonic. A 7th chord and then it's tonic. A 7th chord and then it's tonic, and brings you back to B major. So temporarily we act like we're in B major. Measure 31, we go back to the E minor with ornamentations of the melody, but the same thing. Measure 42 is where it gets weird again. Measure 42, we have the dominant. Now, every time we've had this chord progression in the past, it has been deceptive, and we've gone to a G major. So you're expecting the deceptive again, because we've had it, like, what, 5 times before already? So you want to hear G major, but he doesn't do that. He takes you to the dominant. And then he takes you here. E minor. Back to E minor. So 46, end of 45, we've got B7 again. We're expecting after B7 to hear E minor because we're in the key of E minor, and every time we've had this progression before, it's gone to E minor. This time it goes to major. Right here we've got A, and then we're going to visit D minor briefly. D sharp diminished. Sharp diminished again. This is another chord that you want to maybe highlight a little bit, find some comfort in it, because the audience is definitely going to be thrown off a little by it, but if you really understand this D sharp diminished, it's so beautiful. So anytime in this piece, just to recap, anytime you have a 7th, a dominant into a tonic, even if it's not B7 to E, like in measure 14 where you have the G7 to C, and then you've got the A7 to D, and then you've got the B7, the F7 to B, anytime you have those, bring those out. Anytime you are going from B7 to G major, like in measure 5 to 6, definitely bring that out, because that's a deceptive cadence. That's another moment that the audience is going to need a little bit of reassurance on. So if you lean into those, it'll feel really, really pleasant. And actually, in this case, it's going to feel like an unexpected moment of brightness or light. In 14, when you have those 7ths to the tonic, 7ths to the tonic, if you bring out those moments of resolution that happens whenever you play a 5 chord to a 1 chord, it's an authentic cadence, by the way, that's what's going to feel a little bit like a hug. So measure 14 to 20, you get to give them a lot of hugs, but it's interesting because that's also developing tension along the way too. And then lean into this full modulation into E major at 46. At 46, he could have totally changed to the key signature, because at this moment and until the rest of the piece, we never go back to E minor. We might expect to go back to E minor since we have modulated before. We modulated here. We've seen this theme before in B major. So, but we had it and it modulated back out to the minor. So we're kind of expecting this to end on a sad note again. But it rests in the major. So really find the sense of home in this and embrace that. The audience will really appreciate it. Hope you have fun practicing this piece. It's been over 10 years since I've played it, so thank you so much for your grace with me and my many wrong notes. But I hope that this quick little tutorial was helpful to kind of explain some of the chords and chord progressions that's going on in this piece. Thanks, bye.